and I have to say I'm really excited to get to know Anna a little bit more. Anna and Vronsky's love is true and natural. This is like the Real Housewives of Russia, 1870s edition. All happy families are alike. Each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. In my 2023 reading goals video, I mentioned that I wanted to try to read 6 classics this year. And in other videos, I have mentioned that Anna Karenina is at the top of my classics TBR, and it has actually been on my TBR for several years. I think it's about time I tackle it, don't you? My strategy for this read is to find the spark notes for Anna Karenina and read alongside it because I really love that to deepen my reading experience. It helps me find themes and symbolism that maybe I didn't catch on my own. Next, I need to develop my annotation strategy for this read. Then, obviously, I need to actually read the book. Finally, I want to watch the 2012 movie adaptation with Keira Knightley and see how it compares to the book. Jack from the future here. This video turned out a little bit longer than I expected, so that book versus movie comparison is gonna have to wait for a part 2 video, likely publishing in early April. I have so many editions of the book to choose from for this read. I really have had this on my TBR for a long time. I've gotten a lot as gifts, so I have 3 to choose from, but I think I will primarily be reading this one so I can annotate this one. Let's go ahead and get started. So here I am on SparkNotes trying to research some themes for Anna Karenina, and I don't know what I've done to myself because it says the themes social change in 19th century Russia, which sounds dull if I'm being honest. The blessings of family life. Okay. And the philosophical value of farming. Oh my gosh, that sounds drab. I don't want to annotate that. For motifs, it's telling me about the interior monologue. Not a big deal. Okay, can deal with that. Adultery. So I've read the synopsis of the book and everything I look at. This is about an affair. So if you don't like cheating tropes, this isn't going to be the book for you because that's what this is about. Forgiveness, it says that occurs regularly, so that's something I will probably annotate there. SparkNotes has a section for symbols, but I don't think I'm going to annotate those. Let's talk about trains, a racehorse, some people's marriage, so I don't think I'm going to tab any of those. I liked this section on Google that says Anna Karenina encourages us to grasp how we miss things right before our eyes. Tolstoy is always showing us this truth. We do not see the world, we overlook it. So that seems really interesting. I've been doing all this research though to figure out how to annotate the book, and I'm actually spoiling myself quite a bit, so I need to just jump in. I tabbed the 8 parts of the book so I can create a reading schedule for myself. And then what I decided for the annotations are right here. Apparently there are only like 7 main characters, so that should be pretty easy, but here are some of the other things I found that I can expect when reading Anna Karenina. So I mentioned that I want to annotate forgiveness with that blue color, and there hasn't been too many situations yet. However, the word forgiveness is definitely mentioned a lot. So here we have lots of mentions of guilt and forgiveness. Here we have it a lot. And then down here as well. So definitely heavy-handed on the whole forgiveness thing. Checking in on my reading progress for Anna Karenina, I am on page 66, so I'm not that far in, but what I have to report to you so far is how approachable the language is. You never really know with classics, and in particular, since this is translated from Russian, it can be a little bit intimidating, but I feel like I'm just reading a contemporary fiction book so far. It's very easy to comprehend. We've been introduced to a small cast of characters, and I can't say that they are incredibly likable, so far, but I am very entertained by their perceptions on the world, on themselves, on society. So that's been really interesting. And it took a while before we meet our title character, Anna. Being on page 66, I was just introduced to her. However, I really like how she is described. So this is from the perspective of Vronsky, and it says here, he felt a need to glance at her once more, not because she was very beautiful, not because of the elegance and modest grace that could be seen in her whole figure, but because there was something especially gentle and tender in the expression of her sweet-looking face as she stepped past him. It continues on. In that brief glance, Vronsky had time to notice the restrained animation that played over her face and fluttered between her shining eyes, and the barely noticeable smile that curved her red lips. It was as if a surplus of something so overflowed her being that it expressed itself beyond her will. Now in the brightness of her glance, now in her smile. She deliberately extinguished the light in her eyes, but it shone against her will and in barely noticeable smile. There's something about this character description, about someone who is so animated and so full of spirit that she's trying to hold herself back, trying to dull her shine and be less noticeable, that I thought was a very interesting way of describing someone. And I have to say, I'm really excited to get to know Anna a little bit more. I'm pretty sure this book won't go in the direction of unaliving somebody, but if that were the case, I would not be mad. I think this guy deserves everything bad coming his direction. On page 71, we have another description of Anna. This time it is from the perspective of Kitty. And while I'm reading it, I want you to just picture how old you think Anna is. Because I didn't know. I must have missed it up to this point if we've said how old she is, so I had to Google it after I read this because it definitely, well, let me just read it. She felt that she was not only under her influence, but in love with her, as young girls are capable of being in love with older married ladies. Anna did not look like a society lady or the mother of an 8-year-old son, but in the lithelessness of her movements, the freshness and settled animation of her face, which broke through now as a smile, now as a glance, would have looked more like a 20-year-old girl had it not been for the serious, sometimes sad expression of her eyes, which struck Kitty and drew her to Anna. Kitty felt that Anna was perfectly simple and kept nothing hidden, but that there was in her some other, higher world of interests, inaccessible to her, complex and poetic. Based on that description, that impression from Kitty, who is 18 years old, by the way, I should have mentioned that, how old do you think Anna is? Google says at this time Anna is 27. SparkNotes did warn me that there was a lot of content about farming, but I really don't need all this detail about mowing grass. This is not a fun part in the book. I am just about at the 40% mark in Anna Karenina, so I figured this was as good of time as any to give you an update. And I think what I'll do is I'll go through very briefly what's going on in the plot up to this point, go through some of my reactions, some of my opinions on some of the characters based on some of the things that I read, and then I did have to leverage SparkNotes to clarify some things for myself, specifically when it came to the lengthy descriptions of farming. I didn't understand the point, so I had to pull up SparkNotes to look at the analysis in that, and while I was there I looked up some other things, and it did give me some more context, so I wanted to share some of those things with you. This book is set in Russia. We are in both Moscow and St. Petersburg. We kind of go back and forth, and there's a lot of characters. We follow different members of a family, and they're all linked in some way. If you've never read Russian literature before, something to be aware of is the many variations of one character's name. It can be really confusing to follow along. Luckily in this edition there is a character guide, which is always helpful with Russian literature. But for me, I just tend to pay attention to the context, the situation that we're in, to really determine which character we're talking about. Also, I have a weakness when it comes to history. So If you know, please comment down below, but I'm really confused why our characters are often speaking French. The book will call out, he said to her in French, or it will literally have the French word or phrase with like a definition in the footnotes in the bottom. And that surprises me. I didn't think French was that common in Russia. So can you let me know if you have any explanation on that? As far as the plot goes, each character is going through their own drama, but I think it pretty much all links back to marriage. So we kick off the book with, I don't know how to pronounce his name. In my head, I'm calling him Stephen. There's just no H in it. Stefan? I don't know. But he is in a bit of a pickle because he is married to Dolly. And Dolly recently just found out that her husband has been having an affair with the governess. And so she's really mad at him. He's thinking that she's never going to forgive him. So we're kind of hanging out with him as he's struggling with this. But I don't think he's an incredibly likable character because he doesn't find fault in what he did. He keeps explaining in his interior monologue, but also when he's talking to his buddy, well, I'm not attracted to her anymore, and I'm still so lively and youthful and energetic, and, you know, she's just old, she's had 5 kids, and I may respect her a little bit, but, you know, she's used up. I'm like, oh my gosh, I am not on your side, bro. Then we also have Dolly's 18-year-old sister, Kitty, who is new to society. She's finally come of age, and you know, as you do when you're 18, she's looking for a husband, looking to get married off. And she has 2 options. She has Levin, who is also a buddy of that Stephen guy, and then Vronsky. And Vronsky is the handsome, dazzling guy. That's her choice. Even though you as the reader kind of like Levin more because his love is more pure. He loves the family life. He admires the whole entire family. He wants to be a part of it. He really wants to be with Kitty. And as we learn from Vronsky, on page 57, he's thinking he did not know that his behavior towards Kitty had a specific name, that it was the luring of a young lady without the intention of marriage. It seemed to him that he was the first to discover this pleasure, and he enjoyed his discovery. He could not have believed that something which gave such great and good pleasure to him, and above all to her, could be bad. Still less he could have believed that he was obliged to marry her. He not only did not like family life, but pictured the family, and especially a husband, according to the general view of the bachelor world in which he lived, as something alien, hostile, and above all, ridiculous. So we know that Kitty is planning on being his wife, right? She gives up on Levin. She's focusing on Vronsky, but Vronsky has no intention of marrying her. And in this time period, that really disgraces a female to be like turned down and rejected or almost seen as tainted goods. I mean, I don't think they're sleeping together. If they were, it's not expressly mentioned. But you know, nobody wants to be a backup option, so it really kills her reputation when she just barely entered society. So you know she's in a tricky situation. All this is going on, and Stephen's sister Anna decides to visit this crowd because she wants to resolve the issue going on with Stephen and Dolly. So while she's there, she meets Kitty. Kitty loves her. I've read you that description of how Kitty saw Anna, and Kitty's like, you have to come to this ball. You have to come to this ball with me. It's going to be so much fun. Anna's like, no, I don't want to go. It's okay. She's convinced, which, by the way, the whole nightlife is very, very interesting to me. Like, these are some active people. I don't know when they sleep. I go to bed at like 9, 10 p.m. So this is a very foreign concept to me. But I guess Anna's routine is to put her 8-year-old son to bed at 10 p.m. and then go to a ball. Like, I remember the college days when I would start my night at 10 p.m., but it seems so strange now. Anyways, everybody goes to this ball, and this is where Vronsky is first introduced to Anna, and it's infatuation at first sight, and it's pretty clear to everyone, including Kitty, that she no longer has his attention. Anna has essentially stolen him away, and Anna is terrified. She doesn't want to cause harm to Kitty, so she, after the ball, like the next day, she leaves. She goes home to her husband. And Vronsky follows her, which is just creepy as hell, right? Like, you meet one time at a ball, I don't know if you think you're Cinderella or what, but then just like up and follow this married woman as she goes home to her husband. So Kitty is going through some things, but back to what Anna's going through. She is heading home and she's realizing that she's really restless with her life. I read some descriptions of her and how animated and full of life she was, so I was really excited to learn more about this restless feeling that she was going through. An example of this that really spoke to my bookworm heart is on page 100, where it says, Anna read and understood, but it was unpleasant for her to read, that is, to follow the reflection of other people's lives. She wanted too much to live herself. When she read about the heroine of the novel taking care of a sick man, she wanted to walk with inaudible steps round the sick man's room. When she read about a member of Parliament making a speech, she wanted to make that speech. When she read about how Lady Mary rode to hounds, teasing her sister-in-law and surprising everyone with her courage, she wanted to do it herself. But there was nothing to do, and so, fingering the smooth knife with her small hands, she forced herself to read. So she's really feeling restless in her current life. And this is something that I really expected and hoped would be explored more. I really wanted to understand Anna, understand her restlessness and what was so unsatisfactory about her current life. But I really didn't get that. So that's something that has really disappointed me up to this point. When she finally does get home to her husband and 8-year-old son, she is still very disenchanted with her whole life. And I think this line really killed my picture of what kind of mother she is. She's often saying like how concerned she is for her son. Her situation she put herself in is because she wants to be a good mom. But on page 107, she says, and the son, just like the husband, produced in Anna a feeling akin to disappointment. She had imagined him better than he was in reality. She had to descend into reality to enjoy him as he was. She's disappointed to come home to her son after one night at a ball with Vronsky. And I mean, her husband is not really a catch either. I think his name is Alexei or something. But as Vronsky and Anna keep mysteriously running into each other at various social functions, they are heating up. Apparently Anna is into this and thinks she's in love with Vronsky like quite immediately, which by the way, I don't see the chemistry there. I was hoping for more buildup to understand this chemistry that would convince someone to have an affair. Like if she was feeling super restless and caged in with her life, someone that frees her spirit, brings out the best in her, is what I was imagining and expecting. But chemistry's not there. I don't know how they're hitting it off. Like the love declaration was super quick, but she just decided to hop on board or hop on Vronsky. But anyways, her husband Alexei is described to be very rigid, very by the book, very boring and dull. And I get that. I still don't think he deserves to be cheated on. So this hasn't convinced me yet that this affair is a good idea. But the reason we dislike Alexei is because he sees Vronsky and Anna interacting and he's not jealous. He's not alarmed. What alarms him is seeing other people alarmed by the behavior. And he constantly is going through all these thoughts where he's not heartbroken over Anna. I don't think he really loves her. He just cares about his image, his honor, and what people think. So it's weird. It's weird. And at the 40% mark, I think all the characters are really unlikable. I feel like that has to be the intention of this, right? The way that these characters read, the things I just shared, you'd think they're all unlikable, right? So that's going on with the plot, but here's where I get confused. I want to read you some stuff from SparkNotes because I may not have the intended impression from this read so far. I want to read a couple things from the SparkNotes analysis from the different chapters that I've read because it's really interesting. So speaking of Alexei, or he's called Karenin in this summary, Tolstoy's representation of Karenin changes gradually but drastically so that by this point in the novel, we are likely to have a very different image of him from the image that we had earlier. Without fully realizing, our perception of him has altered. Karenin is a competent but colorless statesman, a perfectly nice person, but too absorbed in policy decisions and abstract issues to develop much of a distinct personality. So that kind of fits with what I was saying, kind of bland, kind of by the book. Tolstoy reveals more of Karenin's feelings, which do not enhance our respect for him. Okay, that aligns with what I was saying. He comes across as pretentious and comical. Definitely true. Our regard for Karenin sinks, just as Anna's regard for him does. This shift is precisely Tolstoy's intention, making us feel as if we evolve along with the heroine of the novel. Okay, I agree that Karenin or Alexei has really gone downhill as we learn more about him, but I'm not on Anna's side, okay? Just because he's boring doesn't mean it justifies her sleeping with somebody else. I don't agree with our heroine here. Earlier, when I was looking on SparkNotes for the different themes and symbols, I had mentioned very briefly that Vronsky's racehorse was the symbol for something, but I didn't read too much into it at that point in time. But after reading the scene, I could definitely see a correlation to the racehorse with some other things that were going on. So I looked that up, and so in part, it says Vronsky's disaster in the horse race is a brilliant symbol of the difficulties he faces as Anna's lover. Vronsky is on public display as he rides the officer's steeplechase, just as his love affair with Anna is on public display despite all his efforts to keep it secret. He struggles to control the horse, a creature he does not know well, just as he struggles to understand the still unfamiliar intricacies of his relationship with Anna. And it goes on from there. I don't want to spoil it, but this section, there's actually a lot of different interactions with the horse that correlate to what's going on with Anna, and then there's also some foreshadowing. So that was really interesting. I'm glad I went back to read that. But the part that made me go back to SparkNotes in the first place was in relation to the farming. I said that I was kind of overwhelmed and bored with all the descriptions. It's pretty much with Levin. He is living in the countryside, recovering after getting turned down by Kitty, right? He feels really rejected, kind of bummed. This is Lowe's life. So he's focusing on the joys of farming, and I was bored as hell, did not see how it related to anything. I mean, we spent a lot of pages talking about mowing, and I didn't see how that related. So I looked on SparkNotes, and it says, in part, Levin's problems with his land have elements in common with Anna and Vronsky's predicament. Anna and Vronsky's love is true and natural, and their early spiritual delight in each other is comparable to Levin's feeling of rapture and fulfillment when mowing. Yet we see, like Levin, Vronsky and Anna have trouble managing this love that should be so simple and natural, but that society resists from all sides. The central question in both situations is whether society can ever learn to accommodate nature, whether grain fields or love, without loss or sacrifice. So this makes me happy because I understand why that section is part of the book, and so that was very, very useful. I'm glad I went to SparkNotes. But how they're describing the love between Vronsky and Anna as like pure and natural, I'm like, I'm missing the point. I am missing the point. Did you not hear that quote that I read about Vronsky and how he doesn't believe in love and marriage and being a husband? And in everything he's going through with Anna, there's times when he just completely checks out from her, when he's just like, God, she's being emotional, like, I don't want to deal with this. And he's not even sure, he's not committing marriage. And actually some things like he's encouraging her to just abandon her son too. He's a bad guy. Like, are you supposed to be rooting for these two? Because I don't get it. I don't see it. So I dislike every single character. Those are all the reasons why. I thought it was intended for all the characters to be unlikable. But I think I might be wrong. I don't know if that was Tolstoy's intention. So, but that's how I feel. I'm engaged in the story. I really want to see what goes on with the plot and these characters, but that's how I feel up to this point, at the 40% mark.
to agree to disagree on that one. There's a section on 453 where one of our characters is talking about the moment she fell in love and how she kind of changed. So it mentions her old life and how now she feels really indifferent towards all those things. The people, the situations, she just feels completely different. Ever since the moment 6 weeks earlier that the love was professed, it was like a done deal in her soul. And I just love this whole passage and this whole description of how she changed. Vronsky is absolute garbage. I don't understand why he's so dang lovable. This really summarizes it. Vronsky gets so excited about the shiny new toy, but then loses interest once he has it. On page 480, it's really interesting, this description of marriage. So here saying that he had these grand ideas of this magical, profound life. And it turns out it's not exactly that way. There's insignificant trifles that now, against his will, are the significant portion of his marriage. And I'm laughing so much because down here, he's talking about her petty fussing and cares that had offended him, but now he sees that she needs it. So even though he doesn't understand it, those cares, like rearranging the furniture, he knows that it's important to her. So now he kind of admires it, and I think that's so cute. I think I can appreciate that in my own life.
I've said it before, and I will say it again. Vronsky is just a walking red flag. Look at this line. But the look that flashed in his eyes as he spoke those tender words was not only the cold, angry look of a persecuted and embittered man. He doesn't want to be with her. Girl, the signs are all there. I did it. I finished the 800 plus pages that is the drama and misery of Anna Karenina. Let me start with just a very, very high level review on it. Leo Tolstoy wrote this in Russian. It is translated to English. It is written in the perspective of an omniscient third-person narrator. So we get the facts of the situation, but we also get the inner thoughts of several characters. This novel is set in the 1870s in various cities in Russia, like Moscow and St. Petersburg. If I were to summarize this book in one sentence, I would say this is a story of our title character, Anna Karenina, and how she struggles between the obligations of marriage, motherhood, and social obligations, and her passions for Vronsky. Also struggling her passions for Vronsky and her desire for independence and freedom. Going into this behemoth of a novel, I was expecting to read about a character named Anna who was free-spirited and wild and felt really restless and trapped in her marriage and her social obligations. I was expecting this character named Vronsky to swoop in and make Anna feel alive. I was expecting to cheer for them as they renounced society and only cared about their passions for each other. I was expecting struggles and yet courage of conviction. However, with all those expectations, that is not what I got in my reading experience. This is like the Real Housewives of Russia, 1870s edition. This is probably my most annotated book, not necessarily in the tabs on the side, but in underlines and comments in the pages. Because I swear, it was like every page, every 3 to 4 pages, I had extreme reactions to what was going on. Usually they were reactions of disgust. For as much of a reaction as I was having to Anna Karenina while I was reading, I'm surprised there's not more tabs in it. I mentioned what I was annotating in terms of the tabs, so I definitely noticed the theme of forgiveness woven throughout, so there are a lot of those tabs, and I mentioned that even just the word forgiveness was very, very heavy-handed and frequent throughout the text. However, I didn't see a lot of examples of family life or happiness in family life. I feel like everyone was just miserable all the time. This is a fantastic exploration of flawed characters, and it really highlights that love without morality will lead to destruction. I found that I really needed spark notes on my read of Anna Karenina, so I'm so glad that I read those alongside the novel. It really deepened my understanding, although I need to argue with SparkNotes a little bit here because I do not agree with a lot of the stuff that they were saying. So largely, I think maybe the whole point of Anna Karenina might be lost on me. But let's dive into some of the things that SparkNotes had some insight on. I'm going to read some select excerpts from the analyses in SparkNotes as it goes through and reviews some certain sections in Anna Karenina. I don't want to read too much because I don't want to spoil it. But in this section here, it says that the most crucial plot event in the novel, the consummation of Anna and Vronsky's love, passes almost unnoticed. Whether Tolstoy chose to leave this love scene undeveloped for reasons of censorship or artistry, the event is marked only by an ellipsis between chapters 10 and 11. Anna Karenina is a novel of ideas, much more than a tale of lust. As such, it focuses on the thoughts and feelings this love affair elicits rather than on what actually happens in the bedroom. So essentially, you're not getting any smut in this. Vronsky's seduction of Anna is marked by sadness rather than happiness, contrary to all our expectations. We realize what a tragic figure Anna is and see that her love is marked not by pleasure, but by desperation. And I thought this was really interesting because I did notice that as well. When I was reading this book, I wasn't really sure when it turned romantic. I mentioned that Vronsky was pursuing Anna, a married woman, and I wasn't quite clear, like, I had to go back and like, what? Did she change her mind? Now she's into this? So that was an interesting point, along with what SparkNotes says about this whole affair being marked with sadness and desperation rather than happiness and passion. And that really encompasses the tone of the novel. It is a very morose, sad, desperate tone. So I thought that was really interesting. I mentioned before that SparkNotes highlighted Tolstoy's intentions of a parallel in the relationships between Anna and Vronsky and Levin and Kitty. So that ran throughout the novel. I'm glad I had SparkNotes to point out all the examples to make sure that I understood them. And so this section says, as Tolstoy continues to develop the plots involving Levin and Anna in parallel, he invites us to compare the differing honeymoons of the novel's two recently formalized romantic relationships. Both couples settle in the countryside, leaving behind social ambitions, and both struggle with the disorientation that comes from having their desires satisfied. This was a section that I thought was really interesting. The different points where our characters realize they have everything they thought they wanted, and yet they're still not happy. That happened in so many different ways for so many different characters, so I thought that was interesting. Relationships are relationships whether or not they bear social or religious stamps of approval. Tolstoy encourages us to look beyond social rules and to examine the inner workings of romantic unions with an open mind. This was something that I really liked in the novel, the comparisons of different relationship types, so I kind of liked that in the book. Then regarding the ending, SparkNotes says that the ending shows us yet again that Anna Karenina is a novel of ideas rather than merely a tragic love story. Tolstoy invites us to think that Anna has pursued her passion selfishly and destructively. Absolutely agree. Beyond that, SparkNotes gives us some juicy gossip here that I wanted to share with you because it's a really good point. So it says that some feminist critics feel that Anna Karenina, though it frequently presents the issue of women's rights with sympathy and fairness, betrays a misogynistic streak at the end. No woman in the novel has any grand philosophical illumination. They simply have children and busy themselves with domestic concerns. Even Anna's rich experience seems dismissed at the end of the novel. All the compassion with which Tolstoy has represented the complexity of Anna's situation goes up in smoke when Countess Vronsky is given the last word, calling Anna lowly and mean. I mean, she's not wrong, though. We know the Countess is wrong. Do we? Do we know that? Aware of Anna's high-mindedness and nobility, yet nobody in the novel defends Anna or refutes the Countess. In the end, it is as if Tolstoy condemns the female right to seek passion and autonomy, even after leading us to support Anna's claim to that right. I don't agree with Anna's claim to that right. In that feminist section, there was actually a lot more with specific examples from the plot that were really, really interesting. But again, I don't want to spoil those plot points for you. So I definitely recommend reading SparkNotes alongside the book. And it did not influence me, in my opinion, at all, because there are a lot of factors I disagree with them on. Not only in SparkNotes, but in other reviews I've seen of Anna Karenina, I feel like we're supposed to be rooting for Vronsky and Anna. It's supposed to be a love story between them. And I disagree. I think they're both horribly, horribly selfish people. I mean, in that right, they kind of deserve each other, but I was kind of rooting for their downfall. I also passionately disagree that Anna is a good mother. I get we're in a different time period here, but she very willingly abandons her son. She just does not care. She just wants to get it on with her new boyfriend. It doesn't matter the consequences or who she hurts. And there are several lines, black and white, where Anna says that she's not even thinking of her son. Or when she does see him and she just realizes, like, I don't know, maybe he's not as great as I remember him to be. I just don't see her as a loving mother. The biggest frustration I had with the book, though, was how each character very dramatically changed their mind. It made it very confusing to understand their motivations. Let's take Anna, for example. She went back and forth a couple times of which man that she wanted to be with, her husband or her lover. And I kind of wanted more courage of conviction from her. It would just kind of give me whiplash how she changed her mind a couple times. Just like how when she did say she wanted to be with Vronsky, she went back and forth on if she wanted a divorce. And it's hard for me because divorce in 1870s in Russia was very different than divorce now. And I'm trying to keep that in mind, how divorce is really the destruction of the woman. But all of society knows that Anna left her husband for Vronsky. She's already an adulteress, so what is a divorce on top of that? I feel like there were several points that her husband basically just wanted to make her happy and would have done whatever she wanted, but she just couldn't communicate what it is that she wanted. She was just very chaotic. She was a hot mess. And don't even get me started again on Vronsky. He just gets excited about the next shiny new toy and he's not really committed to anything. He changes his mind so much. Even Levin had examples of this hot and cold behavior a lot of times, but he's probably one of the least detestable characters in this cast. I mean, I think he's supposed to be the lovable one. He's supposed to be the comparison of like the happiness and family life, comparing, you know, it's the opposite of Anna and Vronsky. I didn't always get that all the time because he wasn't even happy a lot of the time. But like I said, this is really a novel about flawed characters and Levin is just as flawed. It was interesting to see Anna being rejected from society for her affair and her increased isolation and how she started really to go crazy from the isolation. And on the other hand, Vronsky, there's no social impacts to him. Like everything is the same. And so you could argue that that is a little sexist, and I'm sure it is. But from my perspective, Anna was the one who was married. She was the one who broke her vow. She was the one who stepped out on her husband and abandoned her child. So I think it makes more sense that she is shunned from society. And just because I didn't like Anna, I was kind of rooting for her downfall. Like I kind of wanted her to be miserable. And that probably makes me a horrible person, but I just cannot sympathize with her. And I think that's also because I didn't have like the passion I really wanted between her and Vronsky, and there was no courage of conviction from her. She changed her mind all the time of what she wanted, who she wanted. It was just, I couldn't get on board with her chaos. That is my final review of Anna Karenina. In short, I'm very glad that I read this. It took me a little while, and I think part of that was just because I found it very frustrating with all the unlikable characters. But it did evoke a lot of emotion in me because, like I said, I was highlighting and underlining like crazy. I had so many opinions on this chaos. And I can't say this is a favorite classic of mine. I still have to think if I even enjoyed it. Honestly, I can appreciate what was done here, but that appreciation is is really relevant because I had Spark Notes. I think without Spark Notes, I would have missed a lot of the meaning of this. So I'm really glad that I had that as a partner for this read. So next up, I need to watch the movie, which I think I'm gonna do tomorrow. Which is irrelevant because you don't know when today is, when tomorrow is. I want to do a book versus movie comparison, like I mentioned in the beginning, but this video is long enough. I don't want to bore you to tears, so I will make a part 2 video after I watch that, summarize my thoughts, how it compares, and be on the lookout for that. It'll be a couple weeks, I think, after this video. Thank you so much for hanging out with me this entire time while I read this. If you're still watching the video at this point, thank you. You are a rock star. Can you drop a train emoji in the comments down below? Because trains are a symbol in this book. They're a symbol, okay? I'm not being morbid. If you've read this, you might be thinking I like this is in poor taste. But no, trains are a symbol in this. She meets Vronsky on a train, right? Like it has symbolism and meaning. So drop the train down below. Thanks so much for hanging out with me, and I will see you in the next video.